Alright, let's see who's really got soul. I'm gonna get back to talking about the television output of a Mr. Joss Whedon. Gonna get back to Angel, and this time I'm gonna give my top 10 characters from Angel. If you're wondering why I'm doing Angel before Buffy, it's because I have sort of extra plans for what I'm doing on the top 10 of Buffy, so that'll be later. It's just taking me a little longer to get that worked out. So let's do Angel. Top 10 characters. I really like Angel a lot. I think it had a terrific cast of actors in really good characters, really well written. I'll just get right into this. So, number 10. Doyle. Doyle is a character who, honestly, if he had been on the show longer, would have had a shot at a higher spot. Yet, at the same time, the amount of time he was there and the way he went out was really good. It really worked. It really fit. It was appropriate, and it was really something to see him go from the coward who just gets the messages and sends Angel off to take care of everything to the guy willing to lay down his life to help people like himself. Something he never would have done before. And it was a good thing to see. And it did feel earned. It did feel built up to over time. Plus, he was really funny. The actor was somebody who we lost too early and quite tragically, unfortunately. But he was really good. He was really lovable. And it was a shame to lose him, but at the same time, it was a good send-off. So number 9, Skip. Skip, God. I loved this guy the first time I saw him. He was just standing there, hey, my name's Skip. No, do you live here? No, I commute. It's not too bad. Yeah, I love the whole thing of a demon with a day job. And not like a day job like you or I have, like doing the kinds of things, we see angels and demons doing all the times in these kinds of shows, which is guarding this thing, protecting the prophecy, this kind of nonsense. But it's just his job. It's just what he does. And I did like that they brought him back. I don't love what happened with him come season 4. It's not awful as far as those sorts of turns go with the characters. It's not the worst one, but unfortunately, my issue with it is more that he feeds into and we've been planning this from the beginning, and it's like, no, don't buy that. I never buy that. And so the fact that he feeds into that, unfortunately, plays against it a little bit. Knocks him down because he easily could have been a couple of spots higher, but man, God, he's fun, and the design is insane and ridiculous, and I love the contrast. So, number 8, Gunn. Gunn had to grow on me. Initially, he just felt, I don't know, it felt like I wasn't sure why he was there. He was the street, scrappy, kind of tough guy, and I'm like, I get it, I suppose strictly speaking, it's not a niche being filled by the show otherwise, but is it a niche the show needs? But he grew on me a lot over time in many ways because he grew as a character. He did grow above and beyond what we started him being and what we started seeing him as. And more to the point, his story over the course of the show was very much about him growing and changing. And so that wasn't just something that happened. That was an integral part of him as a character. And ultimately sort of going in some not so great directions when we get to season 5. But also being able to pull that off in a way that felt organic and natural, not forced, not like the awkward heel turn, like was something like what happened with Skip, but it was a completely understandable series of choices that he made that led to some bad stuff. And his journey, his relationships, him and Fred being together, I didn't love, but I liked better than Wesley and Fred being together because that seemed just so friggin' obvious. But it was it was nice, and he grew on me over time. I went from being like, he's fine, to, no, I like him. So next up from there, I mentioned her already, number 7, Fred. Another character, much like Gunn, who had to grow on me, I think because she sort of filled a dual cliche initially. You know, the girl who's been, sort of stuck somewhere else or the character who's been stuck somewhere else for a while, which is not an uncommon thing to get in these high fantasy or high concept sci-fi kind of shows. And then in addition to that, she is the token scientific mathematical genius, which again, I was like, do we need that? I mean, we've got Wesley as the lore expert. Do we need an all-purpose science person character on top of that? So much like Gunn, I was skeptical of her at first, but she's really endearing and she's really lovable, and I think a lot of that comes down to the performance. I think the actress was really great at getting me to love her and getting me to see her as more than the character traits and tropes that she fit into when she was first introduced. So next up, number 6, gotta give a spot to a villain, Holtz. Is Holtz kind of the rote, one-dimensional villain out for revenge? Yes. But he's a really good execution of that. I think the point at which I came to love Holtz as a character was when there's the episode where Darla dies and Connor is born, and it happens in the alley while they're trying to escape from him, and Holtz sees this happen and he lets Angel take Connor and leave the alley. And he's got his sort of weird genie friend guy being like, why'd you do that? Why'd you let him go? And you'd think, having seen enough of these kinds of things, you think that by seeing Angel with a baby, he suddenly saw humanity in this person he previously thought of as a monster. But then he responds and you realize, no, he sees a way to torture Angel in a way he never could before, because now Angel has something that he cares about more than himself. And sort of that sinking in and him jumping into that hell dimension with a baby in his arms, and then coming back and arranging for his death in such a way as to ensure that Connor would hate Angel. Man, this guy, no half measures. And yet at the same time, the way that he's written and performed, there are moments where you think, oh, there's our redemption moment. Nope, no redemption. Wow, he's worse than we thought. And that's not easy to pull off, because usually we either come to expect, well, yeah, we knew he was that bad, this isn't surprising, or, oh, well, they redeemed him, there you go. And this rides the middle line, and, it can trick you, and that's not a small feat. So, yeah, I do like Holtz a lot. All right, top 5. Number 5, Cordelia Chase. I'm glad she got to be on this show and got to have more depth than she had on Buffy. Cordelia was not, certainly by the end of the 3rd season, was not as shallow a character as she certainly was in the 1st season of Buffy. She did gain depth over time, but she was always still the pretty mean girl. That's who she was. She was, over time, a kind of slightly deeper version of that. But, coming to LA, she got the wake-up call that I think a lot of, people who have it easy in high school tend to get, which is that, yeah, you were hot stuff in your town, but you're in a whole new playground now and you ain't nothing. And I think she was a good character to have that experience with, because you couldn't do it with Angel. He's too old. He's been through too much. There's not really much you can put him through in modern day Los Angeles that is going to measure up to what he's already suffered through. I mean, they would over time. The show puts him through the ringer. But I mean, in terms of that kind of adjusting to being in a new place in a new setting. So she was a really good character to embody that element of the show, especially early on. And then as her character takes on more and she starts to get the visions and all of those things. I really enjoyed her character growth. That's something I've mentioned before, and it'll get mentioned again with other characters. Her initial departure from the show isn't great, and that's me even setting aside the circumstances, or at least as I understand them, for what was happening behind the scenes. But just containing it to the show, it's not great. Like, she's a hero, she's an angel, she's back, she's a villain, she's in a coma. But in the 100th episode, bringing her back and giving her character a proper send-off and proper closure, that was good. And that did a lot, because if that had never happened, if that last appearance in season 5 had not ever happened, she would not be this high on the list. But that did a lot to sort of claw back some of the goodwill lost with what happened with her in season 4. So moving up the list, number 4, the man himself, Angel. Angel is, like so many leading characters in these kinds of shows, is very tricky. Because you have to have somebody good enough that you can get behind them and be rooting for them, but someone with enough of an edge and enough predictability where they're not just the straight man. And he could have easily been that. It's got a big enough ensemble cast that he could have been that. And he could have just brooded his way through the whole show and just been like a Batman knockoff. But he isn't. And it's because of certain twists that they're able to do with his character as time goes on. So, like, getting the flashback to the hotel and realizing that even after getting his soul back, he was still, at least in the not that distant past, for him, at least as far as his lifetime goes, was still capable of doing some pretty awful stuff. Or, you know, in season 3, when there's Connor, I know a lot of people hate Connor as a character, but I will stand by the decision to give Angel a son. What it brought out of him as a character was really well done. We did get to have him as Angelus for a little while, which is always fun, and he got really good at doing that. And especially season 5, you see that ruthlessness that, you know, has been established across the season up to that point that never fully left him, even when he got his soul back. You see that being applied to a mission to take down the senior partners. And I've talked already about how much I love that last episode, and he is a fairly, I mean, I love almost everything about that last episode, but he is a pretty big part of it. Plus, he's a softie who likes Barry Manilow. It's an odd mix, but it works. So, number 3, Spike. This should have been such a gimmick. Total and complete, utter gimmick bringing Spike on, especially after he died. He died a sacrificial, heroic death on Buffy. Like, this should have been awful bringing him back. But it works. It works for 2 reasons. The first is they have consequences, and they have, you know, actual weight and gravitas to the fact that he came back from the dead, which is similar to what they did with Buffy herself on that show. You know, it's not just back from the dead, everything's fine. No, he's a ghost for a while. He's slipping into hell. And, you know, that gives weight to his return. That helps. And then his dynamic with Angel and how much they cannot stand each other. Souls, no souls, doesn't matter. These guys hate each other, but they're also on the same side now. And it's really fun watching them ping off each other, and then every now and then having those quiet bonding moments as the two of them realize that they possibly have more in common with each other than anyone else on the planet, and they just have their little moments of connection. And I tend to think of the Hole in the World episode for that, when they realize they're not going to be able to save Fred. I think the weight of that hits them both individually, but hits those two collectively because they're in each other's presence all the better. And Spike, despite it, you know, again, should have been such a gimmick, great addition to the show. Now, before I get into the top 2, I have a character who I feel like I need to acknowledge why he did not make the top 10 because otherwise people are going to ask, and that's Lorne. I don't dislike Lorne. I do like Lorne, but Lorne is also for me the epitome of a supporting character. He is a character who has a great chemistry and rapport with other characters. He does, fun and interesting things, but anytime they put the spotlight on him, he doesn't work nearly as well. He is the essence of a supporting character, and if the show had left it at that, he would be on this list. He would, at the very least, he would have bumped out Doyle. But because the show kept coming back and putting a spotlight on him, even into season 5 when they should have known better by then, it just never worked. He was a terrific side character that they didn't always utilize well, but he was a fun character, very well performed. He'd be the honorable mention, number 11. But now let's get back into the list proper. Number 2. Illyria. Oh man, this really shows the acting prowess to go from Fred to Illyria, night and day. These characters, like, no resemblance to each other at all, and she feels dangerous. And that is impressive, given how small and mousy and lovable as Fred, this person that we've seen, is. But now that she's possessed and taken over by this ruthless, angry goddess, she is legitimately scary and intimidating. And I love the look. I love her interactions. I love that they even managed to humanize her without actually, sort of, say, pulling a full Anya on her and, reducing her down to human. They still managed to humanize her by showing her pain at realizing that her followers, who she expected to be, the army that she would leave, they're all dead. And the world has forgotten her. And so just starting from there and then going through her trying to adapt, and again, not playing it for comedy the way as much, the way something like Anya was done, doing it with weight and never forgetting that she is dangerous. And the bond between her and Wesley that forms is really, really good. And when he dies in season 5, that is one of my favorite moments, where he gives her permission to lie to him and to make him think she's Fred. And if you've been keeping track of the major characters, you should maybe realize that means number 1, Wesley Wyndam-Pryce. This guy's character arc, especially if you go back to Buffy, and to be clear, I'm not counting his appearance on Buffy, because he was basically unchanged from there to when he showed up in season 1. He was the exact same guy. But his arc, you look at Wesley in either season 3 of Buffy or season 1 of this show, and you look at season 5, especially the end of season 5, it is such a wide gulf between where he started, where he ended up. But if you watch everything in between, it all tracks. It makes perfect sense. Every step of the way, every decision that he makes that turns him from this, weak, Weasley, book knowledgeable guy who doesn't really seem prepared to get his hands dirty, to somebody who will kill, who will betray his friends if he feels it's necessary, who is prepared to shoot his father. It tracks. It follows. It flows. And it is no small feat. It's slightly hyperbolic to make this comparison, but I do feel it's worth making all the same. It's not dissimilar to the kind of transformation you see for Walter White in Breaking Bad. Now, again, I'm not saying it's quite on that same level, because obviously that entire show was about just that character, so that's going to be a little deeper, a little richer, a little better. But that, from starting point to end point, and watching that transformation from beginning to end, watching Breaking Bad did remind me at a few points about watching Wesley, because you can see you you get a sense watching him. You can see the gears turning. You feel like you can watch the thought processes that lead him to the decisions to do things like take Connor, to do things like hook up with Lila, to do things like, work with Illyria, and to stand his ground when he needs to, and to, and, for all the things that he does. I think it's one of the best long-term arcs in television. I do. And that's why Wesley is my number one character from Angel. But who's yours? Doesn't have to be one of mine. What are your top 10? Or just what's your favorite? Or how wrong am I? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. You know all the stuff that you can do. You don't need me to tell you. I will mention that I do have a Patreon. There's a link for that below. Plus, all the usual stuff. So until next time, this council is adjourned.